Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another another video on legendary aspects. So, legendary aspects are pretty cool things, and they're versatile in how they can be utilized across multiple characters, which is one of the reasons why I'm currently starting with the more generic aspects than the more class-specific aspects. Today's aspect that we're going to be talking about is actually one that comes from Diablo 3. Believe it or not. So if I take you over to the Diablo 3 aspect, I believe I have it right here. It's called the Convention of the Elements. So the Convention of the Elements was a legendary that was introduced. I can't remember when it was introduced exactly. But basically how it worked is gain a 150 to 200% increased damage to a single element for 4 seconds. This effect rotates through the elements available to your class in the following order: arcane, cold, fire, holy, lightning, physical, poison, and so forth and so on. As you can see, though, the new version of the item, which is just simply dubbed of elements instead of convention of the elements, it functions a little differently. Instead of rotating through each individual damage type, it rotates through the damage types in a set number. So you get 3 basically damage types in each pattern, and the 3 damage types in each pattern are going to give you fire, lightning, and physical, and cold, poison, and shadow. So while it is activated, you get the cold, poison, and shadow, and then 7 seconds later, it is activated again, and it gives you the fire, lightning, and poison. And it's just going to continually rotate in between these effects constantly. And I've got to remove Cody's Bojangles here because they love to jingle while I'm recording my videos. Now, the aspect of the elements is interesting. Some characters, it's not really as good for. So if you are a fire, lightning, and physical character, and you don't have any cold, poison, or shadow, well, then it's only going to give you a bonus effect about half of the time, which is kind of unfortunate. However, if you're like me, like this particular character, I scale 2 things. I scale physical and I scale poison. The reason why I scale physical is because the claw ability dishes out physical damage, and the physical damage that the claw ability has is actually converted into poison through the toxic claws passive. So in this particular case, with my character, utilizing this actually gives me a bonus 100% of the time. Half of the time, it's boosting up the physical damage of the claw ability itself, which in turn gives me more poisoning damage. And the other half of the time, it's boosting up the poison damage itself, which is, of course, coming from the claw. So I'm getting a full-time bonus from this particular aspect. Now, you can put this on an amulet, and putting it on an amulet would give you a 45% as opposed to a 30%. And also, if you threw this on a two-handed weapon, you would get a total of 60% times, which is pretty nice. Now, how does this actually work? Well, basically, it's a percentage multiplication, which actually is represented differently. So it's not 30 times, it's 30% times, which is very important, and 30% times is represented as 1.30x. So if you were to have, say, 5,000 damage, it would be 5,000 times 1.30, not 5,000 times 30, which is definitely a big difference. Now, when you're actually utilizing the elements ability, and you're out in the open, it doesn't work when you're in town. When you're outside, or if you're in the training room, which is pretty cool, you will see the actual convention of the elements, or the elements aspect, rotating around you, indicating which element type you are currently on. So in this particular case, I'm on cold, physical, fire. And 7 seconds later, it will rotate back to the, or is that, hold on, that's fire, lightning, physical, sorry. Then it will rotate back to cold, poison, shadow. So very easy to see which one it is. Obviously, the fire gives away the fire side, and I think the poison is the clearest indication that you're on the poison side because it's nice and green and very easy to see. This particular one, I think, is really cool. It is capable of being put on your gloves, your rings, your amulet, your one-handed and two-handed weapons, and being an offensive aspect, it just generally consumes one of the more important slots, though. I think that's kind of the crazy thing about the offensive aspects, is that there's so many good offensive aspects that sometimes it's hard to choose which one we want for our particular character, like which one would be better than others. The way that I like to look at it when it comes to offensive aspects is is the offensive aspect always useful? Okay. Or is it only useful some of the time? In this particular case, we have an aspect that could potentially be useful all of the time, or it could be potentially useful only half of the time. And that does make for an interesting choice on whether or not you want to use it in a specific slot. Having 60% bonus on the two-handed slot is also really interesting for maybe some characters that would like to enhance elemental damage. Barbarians in particular have two-handed slots that they can pass on. There are also other characters in the game like the Rogue, which can put it on their bow, and they have multiple elements coming from things like Shadow Imbuement, Ice Imbuement, and Fire Imbuement. And this means that you can potentially get a large amount of damage through these characters by adding in the elements and enhancement. The aspect was only recently introduced, though. I think it was 1.20. Was it 1.20, I think? And when it first came out, it was actually only additive. And everybody kind of laughed at it because as an additive bonus, it really wasn't very powerful. But now that it has been converted into a multiplicative bonus, it is much more interesting. It's definitely one of those ones that you want to find in the more perfect state. And speaking of finding it, I think it's a good idea to go over to Diablo4.life and take a look at the gambling calculator. So this is a pretty interesting tool that Proner and I came up with. And basically what it does is it tells you the best odds to find that particular item, right? So let's take a look at the elements. And according to this, the most optimal item to gamble for the elements aspect is the one-handed weapons on the Barbarian, Necromancer, or Sorcerer. And this is because they have the best chance of getting that specific aspect. It's just better for them. This particular aspect, not too difficult to come by. Although I have actually been kind of hoarding them because I do use them a lot. I play around with it to see if I think it's going to be useful. But if I take a look in here right now, I bet you I probably have like quite a few of them. Let me type in of elements. There we go. So I've got a 60 right there. I've got a 30. I got another 30. So you can see I have 3 perfect ones in my inventory right now. And that's, of course, not even counting any ones that I might have hiding in other places. A lot of the times I'll have some hiding on my characters here and there. Mainly because it's a nice one. It's a nice addition to the game. A very easy way that you can add additional damage to your character if you're having trouble figuring out what you want to put on the character. And as a multi-elemental character, it definitely comes in handy, depending on what kind of setup you're running. My rogue, for instance, is utilizing Shadow, Cold, and Poison. This particular character is using Physical and Poison as well. So it's not too difficult to have a character set up with multiple elements where you could take advantage of this. Now, the main issue with this, though, is that if your multiple elements line up with the wheel, then you may not be getting the actual good effect. Like, for instance, if I'm a Fire Lightning character, well, then that doesn't really help me very much, does it? Because now I'm still only on one side of the wheel, and so when it changes over to the Cold Poison, well, I'm not getting any benefit. My Rogue, for instance, is Cold, Poison, and Shadow. So she is the entire one side of the tree, but not the other. So she has no fire, lightning, and she has a little bit of physical damage, I suppose. So I guess that's not too bad. But she's definitely more on one side of the rotation than the other, right? Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about the aspect of the elements. And just to make sure, because I don't remember if I said before we end this, let me make sure I tell you exactly which aspect slots you can use it in, right? So the aspect of the elements is considered an offensive slot, and like I said, it's amulets, one-handed weapons, two-handed weapons, gloves, and rings. And that's pretty much standard across all offensive aspects. There are some specifically, though, and I have seen some that are restricted specifically to, like, rings, but this one is not. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about aspects. And as always, keep watching.